I don't really know how to start one of these things, but essentially September marked the annual Butterfly Foundation's Love Your Body Week. The foundation itself focuses on educating, supporting, providing services to people suffering from anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, as well as their families, and working with medical professionals. But in May 2016, the foundation received a major budget cut, which caused quite a significant stir because it essentially threatened the access over 1 million Australians suffering from the complex mental illness had to the foundation's vital online, social media and telephone services. That being said, not all news is negative news, because last month the Federal Minister for Health and Sport, Greg Hunt, actually announced that $1.7 million will be provided to support not only the continuation of the Butterfly Foundation support services, but also the expansion of them. So I'll be speaking to Sarah Spence today, who's the National Manager of Communications, to get a greater scope of this. But the reason I guess I'm making this video is because I not only want to understand what the government is doing about the issue, but also I guess go past the facts and the feelings behind it. Because I think anyone who's ever watched a video on eating disorders usually hears like the same things, the same statistics. Things like we know 9% of Australians do live with one or suffer from one at one point in their lives, and only 25% of those are actually known to any medical professionals or seeking treatment for their services. And the worst statistic is that a quarter of people who do suffer from an eating disorder will inevitably die from it and not get better, and that anorexia has the highest mortality rate and the highest suicide rate of any mental illness. It's frustrating because these numbers don't really mean much past the shock factor of them for a lot of people, whereas numbers have kind of dictated my life since I was first diagnosed with an eating disorder. So I suffered from anorexia for about a year, officially from the age of 16 to about 17. And then from 17, I suffered from bulimia quite severely. And it's only recently that I ever started speaking about it and actually coming to terms with the mental impact that it's had on my life and my friends and my family. It's one thing to say that this percentage of people will suffer from one, but when you're 15 years old and you're worrying about being 165 centimeters and 75 kilos, when you're worrying about having a 25-inch waist or having an 18-inch waist, or whether you've eaten 3,000 calories in 3 hours or 300 calories across 3 days, you start to really look at these kinds of issues in a completely different light, and you care far more about what's being done. So that's why I'm speaking to Sarah Spence today, and very excited to hear what she has to say about the new national agenda that we've developed towards eating disorders and the Butterfly Foundation's role in it.
So my name's Sarah Spence and I'm the National Communications Manager from the Butterfly Foundation. And we work for looking after and advocate on behalf of people with eating disorders and body image issues. I've worked with the Butterfly Foundation for nearly 7 years now, so since the end of 2010.
Do you know like any average numbers you can throw out on how many people you've helped with the service?
I could probably say from a national helpline perspective, we help around about 10,000 people per year. Now that's through the phone service, web chat and our email, which is amazing. But then you add on top of that things like our support groups, which could be in the hundreds per year, through our face-to-face counselling, also then through the schools program. So last year we reached nearly 100,000 young people in schools. So, you're looking at around about, close to 150, 160,000 people.
Last year there were budget cuts announced to the Butterfly Foundation. How did the charity respond?
What we were doing last year in May, and we had a campaign called May Days, which was talking about making sure that we have funding for our national helpline. And that was in the throes of not being renewed, which was really concerning because it's the only national service or helpline service for people with eating disorders. So it's one of our, I guess I call it the jewel in the crown services that we offer. That was really dramatic because we did have those cuts. But we were able to develop, through our CEO, Christine, worked with the government, particularly the new Federal Minister for Health, Greg Hunt, And we worked with him very closely and his team, and they have just recently given us additional funding for our helpline for the next 3 years to extend it and to extend the hours. And this extension will occur in February next year. Mm-hmm. We had the service open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you look at people who live in WA, a very critical time for needing support is very much during the meal time, so dinner time and all of that sort of thing. So unfortunately, the line would cut off at about 6 o'clock for people over in WA. So it's been great to be able to say that we can increase that service from 8 a.m. till midnight. $1.7 million has been invested on top of what we already get in for the National Helpline Service. And then it's $1.3 million for our National Eating Disorders Collaboration Workforce Project, which is fantastic. So Butterfly's received an additional $3 million from the government over the next period of time. As the National Organisation for Eating Disorders, what is key for us is that we must have, with everything that we do, the centre of conversation, the centre of policy, the centre of activity, and even our campaigns. We need to have the voice of the lived experience. And I think that's what's key at Butterfly.
Beautiful. Okay, so what kind of services does this new national agenda offer? How does it differ to everything that's been offered previously?
The national agenda is actually a policy document, and it's recommendation to practitioners, doctors, GPs, dietitians, etc. to say, this is what we recommend when it comes to treating people with eating disorders and working with their families and carers. So it's very much about having this consultative approach as opposed to the in-out of hospital, which often doesn't work.
What do you think, from your own perspective, kind of perpetuates this stigma? I mean, is there even one that still surrounds discussing eating disorders and talking about this problem in general?
Look, while I think there has been an enormous shift in relation to stigma attached to eating disorders, there's still a heck of a lot of work that needs to be done. I think what's happened over the last 7 years, or from what I've seen, is that there has been more openness to have the conversation. People are more open to actually identify as having an eating disorder or wanting to go and seek treatment. That's been a big one. And the conversation has widened for people to understand that eating disorders are actually a mental health issue and a serious mental health issue. I think particularly it's difficult for males because there still is this presupposed idea that an eating disorder very much is about a teenage girl issue.
Yeah. Why do you think it took so long for people to see it as a mental health issue and not just, I guess, like something that ranges from a lifestyle choice to like a physical illness?
I think our culture and our society really doesn't understand often mental health, but then you put something to it or you attach to that an everyday thing that we do, which is eating. So food, eating, all of that is a very cultural, social issue. So for people to get their head around the fact that a mental health issue could be connected to eating is a really difficult one to understand. And I think what's really important to understand with this is that it's not about the eating, but it's about the issue of control or lack of control. So for someone with an eating disorder, for them it's about saying, or often, I have got no control in my life, I'm feeling unsure about things, I have a lack of self-esteem or depression, anxiety, etc. But the one thing that I can control in my life is my eating habits and my eating patterns.
Have you found with the phone service that the element of anonymity, I guess, that's involved with being able to call up or being able to web chat, go through all these social media channels, has helped people open up?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really important part. Being anonymous, I think, has very much helped people access our service. So while it gives people the opportunity to ask questions, to talk about their scenario, quite often people then do tend to share more about themselves, but we really respect the fact that people want to be private in their conversation or not reveal who they are. Are we closer to finding a cure? That's a really good question. A really interesting thing that people have found and researchers have come across, and you'll see probably a lot of information around this, is that it's often people have a genetic disposition to developing an eating disorder. So I think that's another aspect that's coming into it, which is really interesting and people are researching at the moment. So I think that very much could hold the key to solving this serious mental health issue. But again, like depression, like anxiety, like schizophrenia, It's a really complicated issue to try and solve. We're making progress. It's still a long way to go, but we are a lot further ahead than what we were 10 years ago.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, not a problem, Bianca. Appreciate it.
I think my main issue with the way we perceive eating disorders is the stigma we attach to it. So it's like only skinny, blonde girls get it that are privileged. It's like, yep, I tick that box. But what about the countless men, countless people of all genders, sexualities, races, religions, the different types of disorders that people get and the different reasons why we can't, I don't think we can just blame things like social media and magazines and celebrities and say, it's Victoria's Secret's fault, or it's institutionalized in private girls' schools. It's like, I don't doubt that those things might have an effect, but speaking personally, I didn't grow up in an environment of serial undereaters with parents that ever put any image pressures on me at all. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Like, my friends have always been incredibly supportive and healthy, and it's very hard to see that all these presumptions either stigmatize or exclude people that are suffering to the point where they feel like they can't speak about it, and they essentially become choked up by the very things that they're purging, or they become starved of any courage to communicate their feelings. And it's terrifying to think that, people will never look at you the same once they know that you've suffered from this, or that you can't sit at a table and people aren't thinking like, oh my God, I wonder how many calories she's eating today, because I know I still look at plates of food and think that, and can pretty much give you a MyFitnessPal breakdown of everything I'm eating. But it's important to remember that it's not the basis of your character or your character at all. And it is an illness that no one asks for. And if you're not going to apologize for getting a cold, I don't see why you should have to apologize for being sick. And I think the best thing anyone ever said to me was that it is okay. And the only thing that you should focus on is doing what you have to do to get better. And I think speaking about it is a very important part of that. And I don't think there's a single person that will tell you that bottling up your emotions is ever a healthy thing to do. That's Bianca Farmakis signing out very emotionally for your sit-up day. Pause. Thank God I wore waterproof.